Hi, I hope everybody's had a good day. I've just commissioned some research with Gemini, a deep research tool, which I wanted to share with you for various reasons, not so much because of the day of auspicious occasion today, which I hope went well for everybody who enjoyed the celebrations, but as a tool for reflection and as a warning to other people who might choose to take the same paths that I've chosen in life and face the consequences for that, but with the caveat to never give up hope and hopefully gain some great victories and successes with this war we're fighting. The research prompt was as above. I'd like to conduct thorough research into state-sponsored child abuse and paedophilic networks found or investigated for operating in collaboration with the British state since 1925, so for the last 100 years. I'm looking to gain an accurate account of state-sponsored paedophile networks in the UK, as they've been involved in the murder and abuse of several members of my family, and to offer insight to the British public and enhance awareness of the true scale of this issue and the insurmountable power wielded by these revolting and depraved public sector organisations to protect both vulnerable children as well as those who attempt to expose or threaten UK state-sponsored paedophile rings in the future. I've personally found this to be particularly challenging and would like to create a resource for others looking to tackle this endemic problem head-on, with a metric for mitigating personal risk to potential private investigators incumbent in the purport of the research. Analysed many websites. Now I'm going to click open. I haven't read this before, so if I make any mistakes, then that's that. State-sponsored child abuse and paedophilic networks in the UK since 1925. This report provides a thorough examination of state-sponsored child abuse and paedophilic networks found or investigated for operating in collaboration with the British state since 1925. It aims to offer an accurate account of these issues in the UK, drawing upon historical investigations, findings and allegations. This analysis seeks to enhance public awareness of the scale and nature of this problem and to provide cautious guidance for individuals considering private investigations with a strong emphasis on mitigating personal risks. Historical context of child abuse and state response, 1925 to present. Early in the 20th century, the concept of child sexual abuse was acknowledged within certain professional spheres. Voluntary and statutory social workers recognise sexual abuse as a significant moral and physical threat to children, often using terms such as incest, perversion or moral danger to describe it. However, its understanding was not universally applied, and children were sometimes depicted by welfare workers as being capable of making sexual choices, even as being described with derogatory terms that implied culpability. Furthermore, while newspapers did report on offences against children, particularly those committed by individuals in positions of authority, the coverage tended to be brief, euphemistic and more focused on the human interest aspect rather than delving into the systemic cultures and practices that enabled such abuse. This suggests that while the issue was not entirely hidden, its true nature and extent were often obscured from public view. The legislative framework addressing child sexual abuse has evolved considerably over the decades. In 1885, the age of consent for girls was raised to 16, a significant step in recognising the need for protection. However, until 1967, the criminalisation of all sexual acts between males in England and Wales overshadowed the prosecution of abuse against boys, indicating that a significant bias in early legal protections. Landmark pieces of legislation such as the 1908 Incest Act and the Indecency Against Children Act 1960 marks further developments. The latter was particularly noteworthy as the first piece of legislation on sexual offences to refer to children as a gender-neutral category, thereby applying equally to males and females. Over subsequent decades, further legislative changes, including the Children Acts of 1948, 1975 and 1989, continued to shape the child protection system in the UK, reflecting gradual but persistent effort to strengthen safeguards for children. Despite these legislative efforts, the historical prevalence of child sex abuse remains largely unknown due to significant underreporting. Court statistics from the 1920s to the 1960s, while showing an increase in the number of cases dealt with, are acknowledged to represent merely the tip of an iceberg. A departmental committee on sexual offences against young people in 1925 recognised the importance of public information and recommended a complete return of all sexual offences against young persons reported to the police in annual criminal statistics, a recommendation that was never fully implemented. This lack of comprehensive data collection in the past has hindered a full understanding of the historical scale of the problem. Moreover, early criminal justice statistics often used generic charges that concealed offences involving minors, making it difficult to ascertain the precise number of child abuse cases without detailed examination of individual records. The focus on gender-specific sexual offences in these early statistics further limited the ability to track the full extent of child sexual abuse across all genders. So in 1928, 38, 48 and 58, there were sort of issues of buggery and sex with girls over 13 and under 16. That is from historyandpolicy.org. This table illustrates the limited visibility of offences involving minors within broader crime statistics during this period. The categories are generic and do not always specify if a child was involved. Key investigations and findings. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse established in 2014 represents a significant effort to address historical failures in child protection. The inquiry was initiated in response to growing public concern following revelations of widespread abuse, including allegations against prominent media and political figures. Its broad remit included examining the duty of care taken by British public bodies and other notable institutions such as the police, courts, education system, BBC, NHS, political parties, security services and private companies. The inquiry's methodology involved a combination of private truth or acknowledgement forums for survivors to share their experiences confidentially, alongside semi-legal public hearings where witnesses provided evidence under oath. While the initial appointments to chair the inquiry faced criticism regarding perceived closeness to establishments that would be investigated, the inquiry ultimately aimed to conduct a thorough and independent examination of institutional failures. That's from Wikipedia. The final report, published after 7 years of investigation, exposed widespread child sexual abuse and significant institutional failings spanning several decades. The inquiry concluded that the state and non-state institutions across England and Wales had failed in their duty of care to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation. Key findings revealed that victims were frequently blamed for their own abuse, and statutory agencies responsible for child protection often lacked sufficient emphasis on the complex and skilled work required. Decisions regarding children were not always based on their paramount interests, and multi-agency arrangements often lacked focus on child protection. Furthermore, the inquiry found that there was often insufficient support available for both child and adult victims and as survivors, highlighting that child sexual abuse is not solely a problem of the past but remains endemic. A recurring theme across investigations was that adults and organisations repeatedly prioritised their own reputations over the protection of vulnerable children, sometimes ignoring or actively covering up abuse. That's from Hansard Parliament. The Westminster investigation, a specific strand of IICSA's work, focused on alleged allegations of child sexual abuse involving individuals of public prominence associated with the UK government, Parliament and political parties. While the inquiry found ample evidence of individual perpetrators linked to Westminster, it did not uncover evidence of any organised Westminster paedophile network where prominent individuals conspired to abuse children. Nevertheless, the investigation revealed significant failures by Westminster institutions in their responses to allegations of child sexual abuse. This included a deference shown by police, prosecutors and political parties towards prominent individuals, leading to a difference in treatment compared to those less connected. The inquiry found instances where institutions failed to recognise abuse, turned a blind eye to it, actively shielded it and protected child sexual abusers and covered up allegations. Several highly placed individuals in the 1970s and 1980s who were known or rumoured to have had sexual interest in children were seemingly protected from prosecution through various means involving the police, the Director of Public Prosecutions and political parties, says that website. The investigation into Lambeth Council's children's homes provided a stark illustration of systemic institutional abuse and negligence. The inquiry examined the scale and nature of sexual abuse experienced by children in Lambeth Council's care over several decades since the 1960s, finding widespread cruelty and sexual abuse inflicted by staff, foster carers and volunteers. A succession of elected officials and senior professionals largely failed to be held accountable for allowing the abuse to occur. Residential homes were described as brutal environments where abuse flourished, and the foster care system suffered from inadequate vetting and oversight. The inquiry also highlighted instances of racism in the treatment of black children within the care system and a systemic failure to investigate employers suspected of abuse or to act on warnings about child protection risks. Lambeth Council has since acknowledged these failures and offered an apology. That's on the Lambeth Council website. The Historical Institutional Abuse Inquiry in Northern Ireland investigated the abuse of children under 18 in residential institutions, including most church-run schools, between 1922 and 1995. The inquiry's final report, known as the Hart Report, recommended the establishment of a redress board and financial compensation scheme, the appointment of a commissioner for survivors of institutional childhood abuse, the provision of support services, a public apology and a memorial. A significant focus of public attention has been on the allegations surrounding Kincora Boys Home, where claims of intelligence service involvements and cover-ups have persisted for decades. While the HIA inquiry concluded that the abuse at the Kincora was limited to 3 staff members and did not occur with the collusion of the state or intelligence services, these findings have been contested by survivors and others who allege that MI5 obstructed police investigation and potentially used the abuse for intelligence gathering purposes. Operation Midland, launched by the Metropolitan Police in 2014, investigated allegations of a paedophile ring operating in the 1970s and 1980s involving prominent public figures. This investigation, triggered by the claims of Carl Beach, ultimately found insufficient evidence to support the allegations and no charges were brought. The subsequent Henriques report, commissioned to review the Met's handling of the investigation, raised significant concerns about the investigative process, including the initial acceptance of the complainant's accounts as credible and true, and the potential impact on the accused individuals. The report highlighted the dangers of a policy of always believing victims without maintaining impartiality and the importance of objectively investigating the facts. The outcome of Operation Midland has raised questions about the balance between believing complainants and conducting thorough, impartial investigations into historical abuse allegations. Beyond these major inquiries, other historical cases and inquiries have shed light on the issue of state-related child abuse. The Butler-Sloss inquiry into the Cleveland child abuse scandal in 1987 revealed the dangers of flawed diagnostic practices and the potential for significant miscarriages of justice. The Rotherham child sexual exploitation scandal, which affected an estimated 1,400 girls over many years, exposed widespread abuse and significant failures by local authorities and police to protect vulnerable children from organised sexual exploitation. The role of paedophile networks and allegations of state collaboration. The report on child sexual exploitation by organised networks confirms that this is not a rare occurrence in the UK and that law enforcement agencies and local councils continue to face challenges in effectively tackling this form of abuse. The report highlights that despite child exploitation being a designated strategy for policing priority, there remains a lack of comprehensive understanding of its prevalence. This suggests ongoing systemic issues in identifying, disrupting and preventing this networks. Not collusion, though, it's saying. Apparently, the Paedophile Information Exchange, I made a video about that the other day. PIE, a British pro-paedophilia activist group active in the 1970s and early 1980s, represents a disturbing historical contact. The group openly campaigned for the abolition of the age of consent, reflecting the presence of pro-paedophilia ideologies within certain segments of society during that time. Whilst Westminster's investigation found no evidence that the Home Office directly funded PIE, the group did receive misguided support from some charities, highlighting a broader societal challenge in fully recognising and condemning child sexual abuse. Regarding direct collaboration between state agencies and paedophile networks, Westminster's inquiry did not find evidence of a formal organised network operating within Westminster. However, the inquiry did uncover significant institutional failures in responding to allegations, which could be interpreted as a form of indirect state protection or enabling of abuse. The persistent allegations surrounding Kincora Boys Home, particularly concerning the alleged involvement of and cover-up by intelligence services, remain a serious point of contention. Despite the HIA inquiry's conclusion to the contrary, the numerous allegations from survivors and other sources regarding MI5's obstruction of Obstruction of investigations and potential exploitation of the abuse for intelligence purposes raise significant concerns about the potential for state agencies to be implicated in the protection of paedophiles, whether directly or indirectly. James Bond won't be very happy about that. Challenges in investigating and prosecuting historical child abuse. Investigating and prosecuting historical child abuse cases presents numerous legal and procedural hurdles. While the UK does not have a state of limitations for serious crimes like child abuse, allowing for prosecutions regardless of when the abuse occurred, the passage of time can significantly impede investigations. Gathering sufficient evidence, including witness testimonies and physical evidence, becomes increasingly challenging as years pass. The memories of victims and witnesses may fade, and crucial documents may be lost or destroyed. The power and influence of state institutions and prominent individuals can also create substantial barriers to uncovering and prosecuting child sexual abuse. The IICSA's findings indicate that institutions have often prioritised their own reputations over the safety of children, sometimes actively engaging in cover-ups. The deference shown to prominent figures by police, prosecutors and political parties, as highlighted in the Westminster investigation, can hinder impartial investigations and allow powerful individuals to evade accountability. The allegations surrounding Kincora further underscore the potential for political and national security concerns to obstruct justice in historical abuse cases. In the face of these challenges, the testimony of victims and survivors is of paramount importance. Their personal accounts often provide the most direct and compelling evidence of abuse, particularly in historical cases where official records may be incomplete or deliberately suppressed. The emphasis placed on survivor voices by inquiries like the IICSA reflects a crucial recognition of their unique and essential role in uncovering the truth and holding perpetrators and institutions accountable. Insights for the British public and enhancing awareness. The findings from various investigations and historical analysis collectively paint a concerning picture of the prevalence and handling of child sexual abuse in the UK since 1925. These inquiries reveal that child sexual abuse has been a long-standing issue, affecting numerous institutions across different sectors and time periods. The historical data likely represents a significant underestimation of the true scale of the problem due to societal stigma, fear of disclosure, and inadequate reporting and recording mechanisms. Victims have endured various forms of abuse, including physical, sexual and emotional harm, often with devastating and long-lasting consequences for their lives. The user's concern about the power of public sector organisations to protect perpetrators and suppress information is supported by findings from the Westminster and Kincora investigations. These cases suggest instances of institutional failures, deference to power and potential cover-ups driven by motives such as protecting reputation, avoiding political fallout or alleged national security considerations. While efforts are ongoing to improve accountability and transparency within public sector organisations in response to these findings, the historical record indicates a need for continued vigilance and reform. The impact of past failures continues to affect victims and survivors deeply. Child sexual abuse inflicts lasting physical, emotional and psychological scars. Support services play a vital role in helping survivors cope with the trauma they've experienced. The courage of survivors who have come forward to share their stories and fight for justice is commendable and essential for bringing these issues to light and driving change. Guidance and risk mitigation for potential private investigators. For individuals considering private investigations into these sensitive matters, it's paramount to prioritise safety and operate strictly within the legal boundaries. Any investigative activities must be conducted in full compliance with the law, avoiding actions that could be construed as harassment, defamation or obstruction of justice. Engaging in illegal activities such as unauthorised surveillance or accessing private information without consent is strongly discouraged, carries significant legal risks. Ethical information gathering should focus on publicly available resources, including official reports, academic research and credible news sources. Maintaining meticulous documentation of all sources and striving for objectivity are crucial. It's essential to recognise the significant personal and legal risks associated with such investigations. Pursuing inquiries into allegations of this nature can lead to potential legal repercussions, particularly concerning defamation, if information is mishandled or unsubstantiated claims are made. Furthermore, the emotional toll of investigating such sensitive and potentially disturbing material should not be underestimated. Seeking legal counsel before undertaking any investigative activities is strongly advised. Consulting with a solicitor experienced in media, law, defamation and data protection is essential to understand the legal landscape and mitigate potential risks. Anyone with information about child abuse, whether historical or current, is strongly encouraged to report it to the appropriate official channels. For immediate danger, the police can be contacted at 999. For non-emergencies, then the non-emergency number is 101. The NSPCC helpline provides support and advice for adults concerned about a child and can be reached at 08 800 5000. Childline offers a confidential service for children, young people at 0800 11 11. Numerous other support organisations are available for victims and survivors of abuse. It's crucial to emphasise that any efforts to address these issues should prioritise the safety and well-being of individuals and operate within the bounds of the law. Vigilantism or actions that could put individuals at risk are strongly discouraged. Conclusion. The issue of state-sponsored child abuse and paedophilic networks in the UK since 1925, so that's the last 100 years, is a complex and deeply troubling one, marked by historical failures of institutions to protect children and persistent allegations of cover-ups. While inquiries like the IICSA have shed light on the scale and the nature of the problem and led to recommendations for reform, the historical record and ongoing allegations, particularly concerning cases like Kincora, underscore the challenges in achieving full accountability and justice. Continued vigilance, transparency and a commitment to prioritising the safety and well-being of children across all institutional settings are essential to address the harms of the past and prevent future abuse. Support for victims and survivors must remain a priority, and any efforts to investigate these issues should be conducted responsibly, ethically, and within the framework of the law. So, still at Signet Hospital in Cewstoke. I've been to Signet Taunton quite a few times. I've been detained there, and I've also been to Signet Blackheath, which was a peak psychiatric intensive care unit in London, and I've also been to a Signet Hospital in County Durham, Darlington, in 2019. And yeah, they're institutions too, and they've taken great care of me, and hopefully I'll be out of this institution soon and won't be making any overt or disproportionate, unsubstantiated allegations of institutional child sexual abuse against these institutions, because I haven't got qualitative or quantifying collaborative or corroborative evidential narrative to do so, and it would be improper of me to allege or to claim or accuse anybody at Signet Healthcare for being involved in that kind of institutional abuse. I do disagree with a lot of their policies and a lot of their staff, and I've had some interesting conversations on the topic with various Nigerian staff, and I think that one of the main things that the people who died in the war trying to defend us and our country were looking for is the future of children and the futures of their children, and what we could save and what we have managed to avert from kind of what could have been a worst case scenario situation to maybe what isn't a best case scenario situation, and maybe with the kind of caveat of fiat currency and kind of what some people even go as far as to call bonded slavery through the legal and financial systems instituted since the end of the Second World War, and the human cost which that not only sort of was incumbent of in its inception, but also has continued since the war ended and long after it ended, to not honour and protect and preserve the rights and dignity of the young people who our nation depends on for its future. The adults and the financial leaders of tomorrow are the children of today, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't know what the children of today really think or how much risk there is or isn't to anybody who goes up against these people. But I've had a really particularly tough time, and it's been very difficult to try and expose these networks without them doubling down. And I've faced corruption from psychiatric institutes, I'll make no qualms about that, and the police force and several high street banks and the Department of Health and Social Care and various public sector organisations who seem to always sing from the same song sheet as these people, do whatever they can to try and insulate them. But I hope that you are successful if you do undertake any private investigations, and I want to thank you on behalf of all of the children who have been through some of the traumatic and harrowing experiences that no child should have to go through, for everybody that aligns themselves with the righteous and justice cause of protecting them, whether that's as a soldier on the front line defending our freedom and our liberty, or somebody sat with a laptop in their bedroom searching through the internet and conducting investigations in their own local communities to root out these kind of depraved and degenerate, emaciated monsters. Happy VE Day, and hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and I hope it's been insightful for you. And just be very careful if you do try to go up against these people, because they have great influence and they're very powerful people.